My wife's text read, "Everyone at work knows you were fired. They're all mocking you. Maybe try being a real man." Hours later, her manager showed up at my apartment begging for help. When she came home, I said calmly, "Your entire branch is getting shut down next week. By me. I bought the company." Her jaw dropped when I signed the papers. I'd been married to Corinne for nearly 15 years. We met in Boston when we were both climbing in our careers, me in tech consulting, her in marketing. Over the years, we built a pretty solid life. A home in Cambridge, vacations up to Maine in the summer, and her daughter Ava, who I helped raise since she was 4. From the outside, we looked like the picture of stability. But you know how it is. People don't change overnight. They shift in inches. And sometimes, you're too close to see it until you're standing in the middle of a mess you didn't realize was forming. Losing my job wasn't the shocking part. It was just a cruel part of corporate downsizing, one of those nothing personal kinds of layoffs. I walked out of the building with my box of things, still kind of in a daze. I wasn't crushed. I had some savings, some investments. I figured I'd take a few weeks, reassess, maybe start my own thing. Corinne, on the other hand, reacted like I'd personally insulted her ambition. I didn't tell her right away. I wanted to wait until I had something positive to attach to the news. But she found out through someone at her office. Apparently, one of her coworkers had a friend at my old company. That's when she sent me that text. "Everyone at work knows you were fired. They're all mocking you. Maybe try being a real man." I didn't even know how to respond. It wasn't just the cruelty of it. It was the lack of concern, the complete absence of empathy. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading the message over and over. That wasn't just a frustrated partner lashing out. That was contempt. And the thing is, I'd seen little hints of it before. Little digs here and there. The way she stopped asking about my work, how she'd roll her eyes if I talked too much about a client's win, how she'd correct me in front of her friends, always under the guise of a joke. But this text made it crystal clear. That same evening, I got a call. A man named Wyatt, who turned out to be Corinne's direct manager, was trying to get in touch with me. He said it was urgent, about the future of their branch under the new acquisition. Here's what Corinne didn't know. I had quietly invested in a growing tech company called Arion Systems several years earlier. Through smart positioning and a bit of luck, my shares had grown, and recently, I had joined a private investment group that acquired Corinne's marketing firm. Her exact branch had been under review due to underperformance. I was one of the final sign-offs on what to do with it. Wyatt showed up at my place the next morning, panicked and disheveled. I don't think he realized who I was until he stepped into my apartment. I stayed calm, offered him coffee, let him talk. He rambled about restructuring, key performance indicators, office morale, everything you'd expect from someone trying to save their job. He asked if I had any influence on the decision. I told him I did, and that I'd consider his input. He left looking slightly less pale, probably assuming I'd put in a good word. I didn't. Not because of him. Because I had seen the inside of that branch through quarterly performance reports, feedback from consultants, and yes, from what I knew of Corinne's behavior. It wasn't personal, it was data. And the numbers didn't lie. That night, Corinne came home late. She walked in, tossed her bag on the couch, and acted like everything was fine. She didn't mention the text, or Wyatt, or anything. Just started scrolling through her phone while sipping a glass of wine. I didn't say much either. I waited until she was seated before I slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" she asked, half distracted. "Signed acquisition documents," I said. She blinked. "What?" "I bought your company. Technically, the group I'm part of did. I helped facilitate the acquisition. Your branch is under review. It's being shut down next week." She didn't say anything for a while. Just stared at the paper, her expression blank. Then she tried to recover. Said I must be kidding. Said it couldn't be that simple. That I was overreacting. That she'd been stressed and didn't mean what she said. But I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just looked at her and said, "You made it clear how you felt when you thought I was powerless." That conversation didn't last long. She didn't sleep in the same bed that night. And 2 days later, she packed a few bags and went to stay with a friend. We didn't speak for a while after that. She sent a few messages over the next couple of weeks. Apologies, explanations, all the usual aftershock stuff. I didn't reply. I didn't block her, either. I just left it. I wasn't interested in dragging it out or trying to force closure that wouldn't mean anything. The shutdown of her branch went forward as planned. I made sure the employees who had been performing well got connected with recruiters. A few even got reabsorbed into other branches. I wasn't out for blood. I just did what made sense. Wyatt was let go. A few others left voluntarily once they saw the writing on the wall. The weeks that followed brought a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not loneliness, solitude. And there's a difference. Loneliness aches. Solitude breathes. I started waking up earlier. The house was quiet in the mornings, and I found I liked that. I'd make coffee, sit near the window, and watch the sun rise over the treetops of Cambridge. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't rushing to prove something to anyone. I had no one to impress, no one to validate me. And oddly enough, that felt like freedom. I didn't tell many people what had happened with Corinne. Most of my friends knew about the layoff and the acquisition, but I kept the personal details to myself. It wasn't shame. It was self-preservation. I was still sorting through how I felt. I did see Ava regularly, though. She had started college in Boston and would come by now and then to have dinner or drop off laundry. It meant more than she knew. She didn't bring up the split, but I could tell she was navigating her own conflicted thoughts. One night, over takeout Thai, she asked, "You hate her now?" I shook my head. No, I just finally saw her clearly. She nodded slowly. "She was different with you than with me." "I know," I said. "She was a good mom. I'll never take that from her." That seemed to comfort her. She didn't need me to trash her mother, just to be honest and kind and grounded in the way I'd always tried to be. There was something else, too. A calm sense of direction that had started forming after everything fell apart. I knew I didn't want to go back to corporate work, not in the traditional sense. I had enough invested to live comfortably, but more importantly, I wanted to create something with meaning this time. So I started mentoring, quietly at first. A few former colleagues, a couple of early-stage entrepreneurs who were drowning in logistics and imposter syndrome. They needed someone who'd already been through the fire, someone who could help them find footing before the world knocked them over. Word got around. Before long, I had a handful of young professionals reaching out for advice, coffee meetings, Zoom calls. I never charged a dime. I didn't need to. What I got in return was better than a paycheck. It was purpose. One afternoon, I was helping a startup founder revise their pitch deck when I noticed a name I hadn't heard in a while, Corinne. Apparently, she'd applied for a consulting contract with a mid-size agency that one of my mints was pitching to. They hadn't realized we had history. Why would they? The founder asked, "Do you know her?" She listed you as someone who might speak to her experience. I sat back for a moment. Let it sit. "She's good," I said after a pause. "Sharp. Knows marketing inside and out. But she can be unkind when she's under pressure. Make sure your team is protected." That was all I said. Nothing cruel. Nothing personal. Just the truth, stated plainly. They thanked me. And in the end, they went with someone else. I ran into Corinne again a few weeks later. It was at a professional mixer hosted by a mutual acquaintance. It wasn't awkward, but it wasn't exactly warm either. She was polite, measured. There was a flicker of something in her eyes when we made small talk, like she was waiting for a sign of whether I was still angry. I wasn't. I wasn't anything. And that, I think, is what unsettled her most. We chatted about the weather, the food, the speaker who'd bored half the room with a 30-slide presentation. When the conversation lagged, she said, "You've really moved on, haven't you?" I nodded. "Yeah, I have." She looked down at her drink, then back at me. "I was wrong about you. About everything." I didn't reply, not out of spite. There was just nothing else to say. We were no longer part of each other's future. Just two people who happened to share a stretch of road and then took different exits. I wasn't looking for satisfaction, but it came anyway, in little ways. The mints who landed funding because I helped sharpen their pitch. The quiet Sundays when I could read the paper cover to cover without interruption. The text from Ava after her midterms. "Thanks for always being the solid one, Dad." I see it now. Even something as small as being asked to speak at a career event and realizing that, for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending to be someone better than I was. I didn't need to win. I just needed to be at peace with what I'd lost, what I'd gained, and who I'd become along the way. That fall drifted into winter, and with it came a kind of clarity I hadn't expected. The snow came early that year in Boston, late November, dusting the brick sidewalks in Beacon Hill like powdered sugar. I'd walk to the corner cafe each morning, bundled in a coat I hadn't worn in years, and watch the city start to slow down. There's something about Boston in the winter, how it gets quieter, like it's holding its breath until spring. I found it comforting. Less noise, less need to explain anything to anyone. I got used to being on my own again, but not in a lonely way. In fact, the solitude began to feel like a reward. No more walking on eggshells in my own home. No more quiet tension hanging over dinner. No more wondering if the version of me my partner believed in even existed anymore. With Corinne gone, the house was lighter. Physically and emotionally. I rearranged things. Took down the abstract art she loved that never meant anything to me. Replaced it with some vintage photography I'd always admired. I cleared out the spare room and turned it into a space just for reading and journaling. Something she always dismissed as too sentimental. It was in that room, one snowy Saturday, that I found myself going through a box of old papers. Tucked away between tax documents and half-finished notebooks was a printed photo of the three of us, me, Corinne, and Ava, on a pier in Portland, Maine. We'd taken that trip the summer before Ava started high school. I remembered that day vividly. The way the breeze had tugged at her curls, the sound of Corinne laughing at something Ava had said, the lobster rolls we ate while watching sailboats drift in and out of the harbor. For a moment, I missed that version of us, the one that still made sense. But that photo was from another life. A life where I still believed effort could fix anything, where loyalty was always enough, where love didn't have terms and conditions. I put the photo back in the box and closed it. Not to forget it, just to file it away in the past, where it belonged. In January, I was asked to speak at a leadership workshop held by one of the firms I was advising. It was meant to help executives think about resilience, how to manage crisis, how to lead with integrity when the ground shifts beneath you. Funny how life has a way of handing you your curriculum. I told them my story, not the personal parts, not Corinne or the text or the betrayal, just the experience of being blindsided, starting over, and how valuable it is to understand that titles, positions, and prestige can vanish overnight, but character stays. One of the attendees came up to me afterward, a woman probably in her early 50s, and said, "I've spent so much time chasing things that made me miserable. Thank you for reminding me that it's okay to stop and ask if it's worth it." That hit me, because I'd done the same thing. For years, I'd been sprinting toward a finish line that kept moving, trying to earn approval, trying to stay needed, trying to avoid disappointing the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. It never worked, because the person who doesn't want to see your value never will. Around this time, I ran into Janessa again. She'd taken that role I recommended her for and had apparently thrived. She was at a small industry mixer at a downtown venue, and when she saw me, she walked straight over and gave me a hug. "You changed my life," she said, laughing. "And you didn't have to. I just opened a door," I told her. "You were the one who walked through it." She told me, in confidence, that Corinne had reached out to her recently. Apparently, she was looking to reconnect, maybe find a way back into the network. Janessa was polite but firm. She told Corinne that she respected her, but didn't feel the professional trust was there anymore. "She didn't take it well," Janessa said. "But I didn't let that guilt me. Not anymore." I admired that. There's a quiet power in walking away without flinching. Ava came over one snowy weekend in February. We cooked dinner together, and she curled up on the couch afterward with a blanket and tea, telling me about her semester, the guy she was seeing, the professor who she thought hated her but probably didn't. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You're different now. Good different or weird different?" She smiled. Lighter. Like, more sure of who you are. I thought about that for a moment. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." She rested her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was younger. "I'm glad you didn't let her break you." I didn't reply, not because I disagreed, but because I realized she'd said something important. I hadn't been broken. Bent, sure. Knocked down. Shaken to my core. But not broken. And I hadn't fought my way back just to prove a point. I'd done it because I finally understood that healing isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's not a big gesture or a triumphant return. It's waking up each day, making choices that align with who you really are, and refusing to let anyone else write your story for you. March rolled in with longer days and just enough warmth to hint that spring was on its way. Boston started waking up again. The cafes opened their patios, runners were back along the Charles, and people looked just a little more hopeful as they shed their layers. I was settling into my own rhythm by then, consulting a few days a week, mentoring, writing. I wasn't chasing anything. I didn't need to. I'd built a life that felt quiet, honest, and mine. One afternoon, I had a meeting scheduled at a shared office space in Back Bay. It was a new client, early-stage tech firm, ambitious but green. I arrived a few minutes early, grabbed a coffee from the machine in the lobby, and was about to check the directory when I heard a voice behind me. "Conrad." I turned. It was Wyatt. Same guy who showed up at my apartment months ago, dripping rain and desperation, begging me to spare the branch. He looked thinner, tired, but strangely more grounded. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said with a small, cautious smile. "Likewise," I replied. He stuffed his hands in his pockets. "I've been doing some freelance marketing work. Smaller gigs. Less pressure. Honestly, it's been good for me." I nodded. "Glad to hear it." "I was a jerk," he added suddenly. "Back then, I knew Corinne was using work to cover whatever was going on between you two, but I didn't care. I should have." I studied him for a second. He wasn't fishing for anything, just saying what needed to be said. "It's done," I said simply. He exhaled like he'd been holding the apology in for months. "Appreciate it." We didn't linger. We both had meetings to get to. But as we parted ways, I realized something. I didn't feel that familiar tension anymore. No simmering grudge, no need to prove anything. Just acceptance. People make mistakes. They pay for them. They move on. And I had definitely moved on. Around that time, I started getting a bit of attention for the mentorship work I'd been doing. A podcast host who focused on second acts and career reinvention reached out, asking if I'd be willing to do an interview. I hesitated at first. I wasn't one for public introspection, but something about the timing felt right. The recording was casual, just a microphone in a quiet studio on Newberry Street. The host, a woman named Lexi, was sharp and thoughtful. She asked good questions, not the usual "how did you bounce back" stuff, but deeper ones. "What changed the most about you after the fall?" she asked at one point. I paused, then said, "I stopped trying to be impressive, and I started trying to be real." It felt true. Before everything crumbled, I spent years trying to be the perfect partner, the stable provider, the quietly competent professional. I masked stress, minimized my own needs, smoothed over cracks that were turning into canyons. And for what? To be laughed at? Undermined? Dismissed? Never again. I didn't need applause anymore. Just peace. One rainy evening in April, I got a message from Corinne. It had been months. No contact. No run-ins. Just a single message out of the blue. I've been thinking a lot. Can we meet? Just once. I won't ask for anything. I just want to talk. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit for a few days, read and unread, flagged and unflagged. I wasn't angry. I just wasn't sure what there was to gain. But eventually, I agreed. Curiosity, maybe. Closure. Whatever it was, we met at a neutral coffee shop near the common. Public, low stakes. She arrived on time, hair pulled back, face softer than I remembered. She looked tired. Not just physically, but like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. I'm not here to explain anything, she said. I know I can't rewrite the past. I just nodded. Let her talk. She told me she'd started therapy, that she'd been unraveling some things she'd buried. Resentment from her first marriage, the pressure she'd felt to prove she was more than a single mom, the quiet belief that love had to be transactional to be safe. I used you as a punching bag, she said. You were the only stable thing in my life, and instead of appreciating that, I took it for granted. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it, not because I couldn't, but because it wasn't necessary. I had already let it go. She asked about Ava. I told her she was thriving. We talked for about 20 minutes. No arguing, no rehashing, just two people acknowledging a closed chapter. As we stood to leave, she said, I hope you find someone who values you the way I should have. I didn't respond. By May, the last threads connecting me to my old life had quietly unraveled. Corinne's coffee shop meeting was the final page of that chapter. I didn't leave feeling vindicated or smug. I left feeling lighter. The kind of light that only comes when you've truly laid something to rest. No more what-ifs. No more imagining a different version of her, of us, of everything that had unraveled. It was over. Fully, finally, and completely. Life didn't just move on after that. It took off. Ava finished her freshman year strong. She chose to stay in Boston for the summer, picking up a research internship near Fenway. We started a quiet ritual of meeting every Sunday morning for breakfast at a little diner tucked away in the South End. Just us, 2 plates of eggs and coffee, and conversations that stretched across school, friends, life, and the occasional awkward questions about dating. She'd grown so much, wiser, more self-assured. And every time she thanked me for just being there, I reminded her that being steady wasn't something I forced. It's who I'd always been. Some people don't see it until it's gone, and some never see it at all. That summer, the podcast episode 1 had recorded went live. I didn't expect much from it, but within a week, I was getting emails, dozens of them, from men and women who had been blindsided by betrayal, divorce, career losses. People who had held it together for years and then watched it all fall apart because someone close had mistaken calm for weakness. They said things like, "You put into words what I've been afraid to admit." Or, "I thought I was the only one who felt this way." It was humbling. And more than that, it lit a spark. I started writing again, publicly this time. Weekly reflections on relationships, identity, emotional recovery. Nothing preachy. Just honest words from someone who'd been through the fire and made it out. People noticed. A media group I'd previously advised approached me to write a column. They offered a generous deal and full editorial freedom. I said yes. The irony? Corinne's new firm had been trying to land a content marketing contract with that same media group for months. One of the executives, who I'd now worked with several times, called me after a pitch meeting. "I just thought you'd want to know," he said. "Corinne's agency pitched us again. She was in the meeting. Mentioned she used to know you." I laughed. "I'm sure she did." He paused. I didn't say anything, but I passed on the proposal. Their numbers don't hold up. And honestly, after what we've seen you build, we're going in a different direction. That was it. No gloating. No vengeance. Just a full circle moment where things aligned not because I manipulated them, but because I stayed consistent. I stayed the course. I did the work. And quietly, the people who tried to step on me during my fall were now walking into rooms where my name was already on the wall. One last ripple came a few weeks later. I received an invitation to speak at a leadership summit hosted by a national consulting firm. They wanted a keynote about resilience, long-term vision, and the role of integrity in leadership. It was being held in a downtown Boston venue. I accepted. Corinne was on the guest list. I didn't know if she'd attend, but I was ready either way. That night, I stood in front of a room full of executives, founders, rising stars. I told them my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I talked about how easy it is to tie your value to titles, salaries, and how others perceive you, and how dangerous it is to let that perception override your own self-worth. I ended with this. The most powerful thing I ever did wasn't rebuilding my career. It wasn't buying the company that once employed the people who laughed when I was down. It wasn't even watching the ones who mocked me come back needing something from me. The most powerful thing I ever did was deciding I didn't need any of them to validate me. Revenge isn't always about taking back power. Sometimes, it's about realizing you never really lost it. When I stepped off the stage, I got a standing ovation. I didn't look around for her. I didn't need to. A year later, I sat on the back patio of a lake house in Vermont, sipping coffee as the sun rose over the water. It was early, just past 6 a.m., and the world was still. A quiet breeze moved through the trees, and the surface of the lake looked like glass. This house had been a dream of mine for a long time. Not because of the status or the view, but because it represented something I'd forgotten I needed: space. Not just physical, but emotional. A place where I could be entirely myself, away from the noise, the expectations, the compromises. I bought it in the spring, after the column took off. The publisher offered me a book deal, something centered around rebuilding identity after personal collapse. I didn't even hesitate. I wrote the first draft in 3 months, pouring out everything I'd learned. It wasn't about success. It was about steadiness, quiet resilience, the kind that doesn't get headlines, but gets people through. The book did well, modestly, but with meaning. I got letters from people in their 40s, 50s, even 70s, saying things like, "You reminded me who I used to be before I started bending for everyone else." That meant more than sales ever could. Ava visited the lake house often. She brought friends, stayed for weekends between internships and classes. She called it her reset zone. We'd sit by the fire pit at night, talk about things I never thought she'd open up about: trust, ambition, how to build love without losing yourself. She was going to be okay. More than okay. Sometimes, she'd ask about her mom. I always answered honestly, but gently. She didn't need me to shape her opinion. Corinne had already done that work on her own. I hadn't spoken to Corinne again since that leadership summit. There had been no reason to. No text. No message. Not even a congratulations when the book was published. And that was fine. We weren't enemies. We were simply finished. As for me, I never remarried. Not yet, anyway. I'd been on a few dates. Nothing serious. But I found I didn't crave a relationship the way I used to. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't waiting to be completed. If someone came along who fit the life I'd built, who respected my peace and shared my values, I'd welcome it. But I didn't need it. Because I'd already done the hard work, the rebuilding, the forgiving, the letting go. And because, in the end, the most satisfying closure isn't revenge or recognition. It's peace. Not the kind someone hands you, but the kind you build for yourself, one quiet morning at a time.